All right, so we're waiting for Tina and Robert, but we'll go ahead and get started and hopefully they will join us. Welcome back, everyone. So great to see your beautiful faces on another Friday. I am going to start with a poem and asking you to take a breath with me. Thank you. It's really a quote from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is one of our elders and mentors in the work of grief. Real love doesn't die. It's the physical body that dies. Genuine, authentic love has no expectations whatsoever. It doesn't even need the physical presence of another person. Even when they are dead and buried, that part of you that loves the person will always live.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So we had some homework, suggestions, invitations, and I'm curious to hear from y'all. If any of these things happened, talk to your family, talk to your possible healthcare agents, contemplate more of which one and which two, any reading, researching, listening, gathering info, if you got with your buddy, and if you worked on your checklist. So feel free to unmute yourself and report in if you have anything to share.
I can report that I spoke with my partner about doing this, but we didn't do it. But we're both really excited about doing it. So taking a little step in that direction.
Awesome. So you spoke with her about scheduling a time to talk about this.
Yes.
Great. That's a big step. Who else? What else?
I had a preliminary conversation with one of my daughters, and it was about having a death and dessert gathering.
Ah!
So even though Ed will be my healthcare agent, we've talked about that. But I want to bring in some family and friends and discussion around it. And my daughter was interested in that. So we haven't planned it yet, but we're going to do that at some point with both of my daughters.
Excellent. Really good ideas, especially with kids and their parents, you know, like I think that's really helpful to have a family discussion. Really good. Who else? What else?
I did all of the above except talk to possible healthcare agents. I had a really good Zoom with my family, with my 97-year-old mother, talking about issues for me, and see, they're not clarified for her either. She's still living alone and still raising most of her food and just got rid of her chickens. And, you know, so she's like teetering on that edge of what happens when you fall and break your hip. And she's like, well, I won't fall and break my hip. Well, that's good. That's really good. So she actually said yes. She's in California, to moving in with me in Bozeman and going to the senior center when it is appropriate and living there.
Wow.
I mean, that was like monumental. My sister was sitting on the Zoom with her mouth down on the floor going.
Michelle, that's really amazing. You know, it's almost like, you know, if we turn up the consciousness in our world about what's possible, it affects the people around us. Bravo.
I had a killer cool conversation with my husband too, because he was feeling left out, because I was having all these conversations with all these people. Esty Golan, my high school chum, took this course and got me into it. So I'm talking to her on the phone, I'm talking to my family, and he's like, you're just leaving me out of all this. So I invited him to join the workshop today, but he has other things to do. So he might pop in way later. But we did have a good conversation.
Yeah, I want to encourage, you know, I don't really like to people to pop into the second session without having the context, because context is everything. So have him go to my website. He can sign up for the next one, which I actually haven't set the dates yet. So that's probably a better route.
Well, and he did, he says, I don't really want to get on a Zoom. I want stuff to read. So I will provide him,
Perfect.
everything that we've done.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Who else? Anybody else?
Well, this week was tax week for me. So I was thinking about death and end of life, and I was doing taxes. So that was an interesting combination. But yeah, starting to have the conversation, not with my sister, and we both need to do this and get it handled. So we've agreed to that. But then thinking about who else do I want to be on my team, both here and Atlanta. So yeah, and having had some of those conversations, and then interestingly, today in my business meeting, one of my business meetings, my business partner is about to sign her will tomorrow. So she's been working on it. We didn't even know both of us were working on this at the same time. So it seems to be a good thing for me to be doing at this point in time. So thank you.
Death and taxes, baby. I love it.
Yeah.
So I had a birthday this week, and my oldest granddaughter's birthday, and then Easter. So it was really busy, but we also had another issue in our community. A very, very dear friend had 2 strokes, surgery, very complicated situation. And finally, a few days ago, they transferred him to palliative care. And just minutes before my buddy Michelle and I connected over Zoom yesterday, I saw the note that he had passed. And here I am working on these issues. It just seemed really, well, both poignant and timely. So, and I was very grateful for the checklist, because I've been doing some of the heavy duty things like the will and power of attorney and all of that. And I've had conversations with all of my children, but the healthcare, I only can think of 2 people. And then the other one, my sister, who lives all the way in Asheville. So that's a ways away. But anyway, the financial tasks, I actually took the bull by the horns, and I went to the bank and I said, I need some kind of a document to show that my children are the beneficiaries, very official. And my investments person emailed me a form. I signed it, took it to his office so I could check it off the list.
You get lots of sprinkles of love. Good
Thank
for you.
you.
And we're going to be talking about financial stuff later, so you'll have some things to add. Wonderful, Charlotte. Thank you. Who else? Anybody else want to check in?
I will. The checklist, I agree, was really good, to say date to complete and date completed, a little bit of accountability there. And before the class, I pulled out all the stuff that I had sort of collected from various seminars and stuff like that. And I got rid of a lot of stuff and down to, and I saw that I had 2 drafts of my 5 wishes. So at least I'm narrowing it down. And now I have the most recent published one. So that, and I have when to do it. And I did connect with my buddies, and we nudged each other along. And what else did I do? Oh, and I highlighted at the bottom there important passwords to executrix, because that's the one I just really hesitate on. I have a lot of passwords in LastPass, but it just makes me nervous to hand that whole thing to somebody, so
Yeah.
highlighted, which must mean something.
Yeah, you got to really trust that person for sure. I wonder if there's some sort of system that can be triggered upon death. Like that would be an interesting app, right? Where like you have all these passwords and then they get unlocked. Like, but how would it know? Like that's such an interesting concept. But yeah, my aunt went into a coma, went into the hospital. She's since recovered, but there was a whole bunch of her clients and her work that we didn't know how to access, and we didn't have access to her passwords, and it was very stressful. And so I actually put that on the list from firsthand experience, because passwords is like it. Our whole lives are electronic. these
Yeah.
days, you know?
Yeah.
Good. Anybody else? Victoria, Tina, Vidila? Oh, Vidila already spoke.
I wonder if anybody else kind of worked with the addendum to the first 5 wishes. I actually, for me, don't really find it really necessary. I just totally trust my healthcare providers and the executor of my estate to know me well enough what I would like.
Great.
So I haven't really worked on that.
You know, the addendum is completely optional, and it actually gets a little juicier when we get to wishes 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to look at it again today.
Okay.
But if you don't feel like you need it, that's simpler and great. That's wonderful.
I looked at the addendum and I changed a lot my name and crossed some things out. So thank you, Lee, because I wouldn't have thought a lot of those of a lot of those things, you know. And yeah, and I also printed the dementia, whatever it was, and I have a question about where that fits.
Y'all are like the overachieving class. Like you're we're going to talk about that today too.
Okay.
I like to mention on wish to what you should keep in mind as my caregiver. I can't make up my mind if I don't want anything done or omitted to my doctors or nurses with the intention of taking my life. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of, for me, what I would like is to have a natural death process, and that's my statement there. So I'm not sure what that means to them. If that means omitting or having things done. So
Yeah, you know, I find that wording fascinating as well. And I don't resonate with it so much, but like it's part of the template. So you could cross it off if it doesn't resonate.
yeah,
And that's what I was-
because it's ambiguous to me. It's like, I'm not sure what they would think that means. you
Yeah.
know.
That's what I found so intriguing about the addendum was, oh, now here's where I can list that things are situational. So if this is happening, do this, and if this is happening, do that. And so I spent more time in the addendum than anything else, because that was where I could clarify, well, okay, if I'm brain dead, unplug me.
Right.
Right.
It's in this work, you know, it's always helpful to be redundant because, you know, we don't want to leave a whole lot open to interpretation. So those are all great questions. All right, welcome, Jane. The review for the agenda today is rough. We'll see where we feel ready for a break. So we're doing wishes 3, 4, and 5, and more on the addendum. We'll talk about the signature, notarizing, and storage. We'll talk about the dementia directive, the MOST and the DNR forms, after death care, and then we'll take a break. And then the second half, we'll do the after death options, the financials, the building a death literate community, and we'll do one more review of our checklist. So it's a lot to do, but we already have experience with this. So yeah, so let's go into wishes 3, 4, and 5. And did anybody not read last week? I think I kind of got everyone. So I might start over again, if that's okay. Jane, did you get a chance to read last week? You didn't. Okay, so could you read the top of page 8, that first paragraph in italics there?
I'm trying to make it big so I can see it.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have it printed out? That might.
Yeah. Can I is it okay if I just read it from my printout?
Yeah. That's exactly right. I
Okay,
actually might stop sharing the screen because if you have this in front of you, you don't really need these electronic versions and we can see each other better. So yeah, go ahead and read from your printed out version.
the next three wishes deal with my personal, spiritual, emotional wishes. They are important to me. I want to be treated with dignity near the end of my life. So I would like people to do the things written in wishes 3, 4, and 5 when they can be done. I understand that my family, my doctors, and other healthcare providers, my friends, and others may not be able to do these things or are not required by law to do these things. I do not expect the following wishes to place new or added legal duties on my doctors or other healthcare providers. I also do not expect these wishes to excuse my doctor or other healthcare providers from giving me the proper care asked for by law.
Hi, thank you.
Mhm.
So Mary and Ed, would you do wish 3 and one of you read the left-hand column of bullets and one of you read the right-hand column of bullets?
Yeah. I wish for how comfortable I want to be. I do not, excuse me, I do not want to be in pain. I want my doctor to give me enough medicine to relieve my pain, even if that means I will be drowsy or sleep more than I would otherwise. If I show signs of depression, nausea, shortness of breath, or hallucinations, I want my caregivers to do whatever they can to help me. I wish to have a cool, moist cloth put on my head if I have fever. I want my lips and mouth kept moist to stop dryness. I wish to have warm baths often. I wish to be kept fresh and clean at all times.
I wish to be massaged with warm oils as often as I can be. I wish to have my favorite music played when possible until my time of death. I wish to have personal care like shaving, nail clipping, hair brushing, and teeth brushing, as long as they do not cause me pain or discomfort. I wish to have religious readings and well-loved poems read aloud when I am near death. I wish to know about options for hospice care to provide medical, emotional, and spiritual care for me and my loved ones.
Awesome. What do you all think of that wish? What is coming up for you? Thoughts, feelings?
Sounds wonderful. Can I have it now?
I love that. So if you have the addendum printed out, you can look and see that this is the wish that I have, I don't know, maybe the most bullet points. And I got really specific because I am one of those highly sensitive people in life. And there's foods that I can't eat. And there's like, I'm chemically sensitive, so I can't be around like Lysol sprays and other kinds of things like that. And one of my worst nightmares is to be stuck in a hospital with the television on. Can you imagine? I just like, that would be hell on earth for me. So this is where, and I don't like, I have this peculiar thing where I don't like sheets tucked in at the end of the bed. Like that makes me a little crazy. And so like imagining that I was in a situation where I didn't have control over any of that, and then my feet were tucked and the television was on and someone was spraying Lysol, like I wouldn't be a happy person. So I, put a few of those things in there. I also said, I've had an altar my whole life. I don't wear cosmetics. Please don't put them on before or after my death. I fast a lot, so please don't try to feed me all the time. I mean, my close people know this stuff about me, but I think, again, like when people are in a stressful situation, it's nice to have it written down.
Sure, I could just see that if I couldn't speak and somebody came in with heavy cologne and I started getting asthma from the chemical smells, whatever, like the Lysol, but I couldn't tell them that it's because you need to get out of the room kind of a thing. That'd be horrid.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What else? Anything else around wish 3?
And the part of I wish to have religious readings and well-loved poems read aloud while I'm near death. I would probably be more specific on the kind of readings that I would like to have there, and I would change religious to spiritual, and probably one of the things I want to put there is what kind of things I would like to have read.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wrote in my addendum, I have had an altar my entire adult life. I would love a transition and dying altar that contains sacred objects of mine and or my caregivers. Women-centered feminist imagery is encouraged, right? So like that's been my sort of framework, shamanism, whatever else I could get more specific, but absolutely. Yeah. Again, I think make this your own. This template is helpful, but you know, some of us don't resonate with some of those words. Religious might be a good example. Good. So they don't leave a lot of the lines to write in here. So cross off what is, you know, not resonant, and then go ahead and stick your pieces in the addendum.
Yeah.
And feel free to use any of my bullet points, change them as you will. Anything
Lee,
else?
I have the original, My Three Wishes from the company, and it varies a little bit in the text.
Oh, does it? Maybe I should have download their newest PDF. That's interesting. What does it say? What's different about it?
Well, there's a specific point about if I'm not able to control my bowel or bladder functions, I wish my clothes and bed linens to be kept clean and for them to be changed as soon as they can be if they have been soiled. So
Yeah.
that's very specific.
That's pretty specific. Yeah, good for them. Excellent. Great. Okay.
That's actually in the next section in this version.
Yeah, I thought I read that somewhere.
You're right. Look at that. It's in Bush 4. Yeah, they move things around a little bit. Okay, anything else on Wish 3? We can come back to it if there's further questions, but all right, let's move to Wish 4. Vidila, would you read just the heading and then the bullets on the left?
Sure. My wish for how I want people to treat me. I wish to have people with me when possible. I want someone to be with me when it seems that death may come at any time. I wish to have my hand held and to be talked to when possible, even if I don't seem to respond to the voice or touch of others. I wish to have others by my side praying for me when possible. I wish to have the members of my faith community told that I am sick and asked to pray for me and visit me.
Awesome. Marianne, would you read the 4 bullets on the right?
Sure. I wish to be cared for with kindness and cheerfulness and not sadness. I wish to have pictures of my loved ones in my room near my bed. If I am not able to control my bowel or bladder functions, I wish for my clothes and bed linens to be kept clean and for them to be changed as soon as they can be if they have been soiled. And I want to die in my home if that can be done.
I love it. Beautiful. Thoughts about this wish?
In the original one, it says, I wish to be called by my name. Please call me. And then there's a blank for what to call that
I
person.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Because, right, I mean, some people might be in a situation where they're not surrounded by loved ones. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the addendum, I specifically named some folks, and I said, please honor my pace, style, and flow, no rushing. Soulful, spiritual, deep conversations are welcome. Poetry is welcome. I encourage conversation about my death and dying, about feelings and needs, about depth of connection. Please refrain from God talk or soul-saving talk. So, you know, just more guidance of the things that light me up particularly.
That thing about the name, I think is real important, because I was thinking of when my mother was dying and the hospice worker kept saying to her, oh, it's okay, sweetie. You're okay, sweetie. And I know she meant it well, but my mother rose up out of her silence and said, I'm not your sweetie. I'm Jane. We have the same name. So I think that is important for people to say that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because it can be sort of a diminutive, right? It can be a little, I don't know the word, but it can sort of dismiss or discourage someone's full humanity. That's
Right.
interesting.
Like you're invisible, kind of.
I think people that use those types of verbiage also tend to repeat them a lot. And after a while, it's just irritating. It's like, I got it. I got it. I'm sweetie. Thank you very much. Just continue your sentence without that word in it. It's probably the German in me. I could see my mother being the same way.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to convey a certain open-heartedness, but I think that open-heartedness, or love or flow or care or connection can be conveyed in multiple ways, So that's an interesting piece to put in there. What is the kind of words that you would feel excited to receive? I love that.
Charlotte, where is that?
It is the last one under wish 4 in the original one. I had ordered it from the company.
They must update them regularly. I bet if you go online and download the PDF, I'll update it on my site, but if you go on their site and get the PDF, or if you fill it out on their site, it's probably updated.
Yeah, I've done so many of them. I have 2007, 2009, 2012.
On the fourth bullet on the left, it says to ask the community to pray for me and visit. I scratched visit me because recently I called 911 and I called a friend. She called another friend and another friend. The third person showed up, and actually it was not my favorite people that showed up in my house when I'm feeling that I'm dying. So I think it's good to have kind of a gatekeeper to see who comes in, because that might not be pleasurable at the time.
So are you saying that you had an emergency, you called 911, and then a friend passed it to a friend, passed it to a friend, and who ended up showing up was not who you really wanted to be there?
Yeah, I called my friend and she couldn't come. So she called 2 other people that live nearby my house. And I mean, I was very thankful that they were there, but might not be the people that I'd rather have next to me, So
Interesting. Very interesting.
I think this is,
Go ahead.
I think this is one thing I'm thinking about, because you talked, Lee, about having like a team that you've got pulled together, and Ed and I have already know we're going to be each other's health care agent. But I like the idea of having conversations with individuals who might participate in some specific way. And certainly if I were to have someone to come pray with me or for me, I might be very specific who that might be. And it might be something I end up including in a team like.
Yeah. I mean, how do you scoot someone out of your house or the hospital room when they think they're being helpful and you don't want them there? That's a really awkward situation. I don't know. I don't have any magic for that one. That's a tough one. Maybe maybe if your chosen safe person shows up, maybe they could find a creative way to say, oh, thank you so much for coming. We'll reach out to you if we need you, kind of thing.
Yeah. For the person who just died this week in our community, there was an opportunity for people to come to say goodbye to him in very short increments, like 5 minutes, and you had to make an appointment. So it wasn't people wandering in and staying for 20 minutes or anything like that. And two, Mary, have you thought about the fact that you and Ed might go together and then you need a team? In fact, I asked my sister, Johanna, who lives in Asheville, I said, looks to me like Mary and Ed are in your in your circle of friends. They just look like they belong to you. And it's my sister who took this workshop and have formed a team because their own children live so far away. One lives in California and one lives in Arizona. So they felt like they needed, people who are close by and who know them well as their providers to watch over what's going on.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. My mom's 97. I have longevity in front of me. My husband's father died at 53 and his brother died at 52 of massive heart attacks. And he's already 65 and I have no children. So when I started the workshop, I was like, I don't have a team. I don't know who to ask. Well, now I have like 15 people written down already. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we need to consider that.
Well, I have some fun.
All right. Awesome, y'all. So let's move on to wish 5. We can bounce back whenever we need to. So Victoria, would you read just the headline and then the bullets on the left side?
Let me find my page.
Page 9 of the 5 wishes.
Yeah. My wish for what I want my loved ones to know. Please, okay. I wish to have my family and friends know that I love them. I wish to be forgiven for the times I have hurt my family, friends, and others. I wish to have my family, friends, and others know that I forgive them for when they may have hurt me in my life. I wish for my family and friends to know that I do not fear death itself. I think it is not the end, but a new beginning for me. I wish for all of my family members to make peace with each other before my death, if they can. I wish for my family and friends to think about what I was like before I became seriously ill. I want them to remember me in this way after my death.
Thank you. Charlotte, would you read the bullets on the right?
I wish for my family and friends and caregivers to respect my wishes, even if they don't agree with them. I wish for my family and friends to look at my dying as a time for personal growth for everyone, including me. This will help me live a meaningful life in my final days. I wish for my family and friends to get counseling if they have trouble with my death. I want memories of my life to give them joy and not sorrow. After my death, I would like my body to be, and you choose, either buried or cremated. My body or remains should be put in the following location. The following person knows my funeral wishes.
Okay, great. And Sherry, would you just read the sort of 3 sentences that have lines below them on the bottom part of the page? You have to unmute, love.
If anyone asks how I want to be remembered, please say the following about me. If there is to be a memorial service for me, I wish for the service to include the following: list of music, songs, readings, or other specific requests that you have. Please use the space below for any other wishes. For example, if you want to donate any or all parts of your body when you die, you may also wish to designate a charity to receive memorial contributions. Please attach a separate sheet of paper if you need more space.
Awesome, thank you.
I have a question about that. I think even old people like me can donate some organs, right? Or some things. Is that right?
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. There is, we're going to have a whole section on options for after death. And, like a lot of this paperwork, there's redundancies. And while the 5 wishes, I'm so glad it touches on this stuff, it doesn't go very deeply into them, right? So I think it's great to have some sort of summary or outline of what you want here, and then also have other paperwork. So, for example, if you wanted to be an organ donor, you'd have that paperwork along with this, right? And we have a disposition of body we're going to get to today as well. So yeah, good point. So in my addendum under wish 5, it's also sort of got a lot of content. I say that I believe everyone has the right to a good death. I talk about what my spiritual practices have been. Not so much how others remember me. They can remember me however they want. I'm not going to dictate what they do and don't remember, but here's what are important themes for me in my life. I like the idea of creating a loving and comfortable space for the caregivers so they have a place to process and bitch and swear and drink alcohol or coffee or whatever they want to do that's not in the dying room. That's sort of my, ideal fantasy. And then I have here about how I wish my body to lie in state for 3 days. If someone could mute themselves, it's a little feedbacky. And yeah, memorial service, if the folks want that, great. Please wait until 3 days after my death. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, and then where my body and remains should be buried. I also wrote a few things into the pages. I wrote some of this stuff into the pages on page 9 in the 5 wishes, but I sort of repeated them in my addendum. Any thoughts on that, on wish 5?
Can you say something about the 3 days of what inspires that?
Yeah, my mentors are Buddhists and feel pretty strongly that the spirit stays with the body for 3 full days after death. And many traditions believe that, right? In the Jewish tradition, if any of you are familiar, like there was a whole 3-day sit with the body, and in other traditions as well. And so that has become the tradition that we have used in my community, and it's really been incredibly beautiful. I have a whole series of slides to show you about that. We set up altars. We set up 3 altars, and the grief altar is where the body is, and people get to interact with the body and sit, and someone's with the body for all 3 of those days, sort of sleeping in the space, and the space is open for visiting hours, sort of like an extended wake. And very much like old world traditions, right? So that's the traditions that that we've come to, and they're so beautiful, and they are a little bit mutually exclusive from some other traditions. Like if you wanted to do organ donation, I don't think you could do both of those things, right? So if you want organ donation, you have to get whisked away to the operating room and get those pieces harvested that are usable, and then I'm pretty sure you can't go back home with the body once it's been sort of surgically altered. That's my sense. I mean, you might find someone out there who's told a cool story about that, but I think it's one or the other.
A follow-up, just is that acceptable in different, or at least here in North Carolina? And I don't know where I got this thought, but I seem to think that rigor mortis sits in and like the body, starts doing things after a relatively short period of time. Is that not accurate?
That is accurate, yeah. And we use these sort of dry ice wrapped in cloth underneath the body, depending on the time of the year. Turn the air conditioning up if there is air conditioning. We've never had air conditioning at Earth, even where I live, but we manage with the ice packs, and it's generally fine for 3 days. The mouth starts to fall open, and a lot of the care of the body, we do a whole washing process, caring, dressing of the body happens usually the first day or within the first 24 hours. My friend Kimchi died at 8 o'clock at night, and then the whole next day, morning and afternoon, we were tending and caring and bathing her body. And so it's gradual, the rigor mortis sets in is gradual. So you're still able to sort of work with, manipulate, be with the body. And then by the third day, we've never had an experience of like, oh, things are smelling badly or anything like that. By the third day, that's about the outer limit of when you want to have a body in your home. And that's when they go to get cremated or go into the ground.
And one other thing that maybe come up later when we talk about disposition of the body, but I've heard recently about some places allow for open air pyres and burning. Is that for later in the conversation?
I think somebody mentioned that to me, and I might have put a link on the website. I don't personally have any experience of that because you have to get the fire really, really hot, right? I think there's some movement or some article that I saw. If you don't see it on there and you want to send me something, please do. I'll post it, but I don't really know. It's a great question. In most states, you can bury bodies in your own yard, right? People don't realize this. You have to be so many feet from a building. You have to be so many feet from a water source. You have to be so many feet from, this and that road. But generally speaking, we can take care of our own dead. Actually, the laws are quite on our side. People just don't understand that that's true. So there's resources on the website for that too. Well, let's get through any more about wish 5 or wishes 3, 4, and 5. Hi.
I have a question. Have you ever had any feedback about the first several of wish 5, how you want your family to be forgiving and to rectify things among themselves? I think that my family would say that I would be trying to control their emotions and their MO. I know that some of my children are not fond of each other. And if I mandate that, they would say, okay, there's passive aggressive mom doing her thing after she died.
See that? I don't resonate with those, like the dying person telling the living person how they should feel. It just doesn't resonate for me. But again, there must be enough people that feel this way that it ends up in the template, So, or maybe it's just a way of thinking about things that hasn't been, in my opinion, upgraded to a higher level of consciousness, which is y'all figure it out, like that's sort of what I want to say.
Yeah.
Y'all figure it out. Do what you do. I'm out of here.
Right.
So having been in 12-step programs, I started noticing like the holidays started to be very apparent. Watch for the trauma around Christmas because the dysfunctional families will start arguing and things like that. In my own family, there was a lot of dysfunction, and the way that I handled it, instead of writing it in my death thing, was to be proactive and start on it yesterday. And by being light and polite and drawing people together in a very non-confrontive way, like my sister never talked to my mom for 15 years. So basically they would yap about each other, but they didn't even know each other anymore, So just drawing people together in a serene, kind and loving space, or just holding that space for the two that don't get along to get along, and then trying to extricate myself from the three-way conversation. Like mom would complain to me about Nikki and Nikki would complain to me about mom. And it's like, no, you need to say that to the person. And now there's been a grand healing.
Yeah, I think
before anybody died.
Yeah, I think it's legitimate to put in your 5 wishes, like, I don't want to hear about your drama or your differences. Work it out. Don't bring it into my dying room. Whatever is related to us, I think is legitimate. How you want people to be with each other, like, well, good luck,
I have a question. Do you know if you want to be cremated, if they do wait 72 hours or do they do it right away?
I think you can specify that. Yep. You have to, there's some wrangling with the morgue that might have to happen, but let's talk about that when we get there. Yeah. Okay, so page 10 is the signing of the 5 wishes, and it's Yeah, it's an important page. You're going to need to sign it in front of the notary. So don't sign it yet until you're in front of a notary. And then there'll be witnesses, right? So I've done this in a end of life class where there's a notary there and then my classmates sign with me. I've also taken this stuff to the bank and they just have the tellers sign as witnesses. Really, it's just a notarization of your signature. They don't care what the document is. They don't look at the document. None of it is relevant. It's just that this is you, this is your signature, and then they're notarizing your signature. So if you want to put on your checklist when, you don't even, it'd be great if you had your 5 wishes finished by the time you get it signed and notarized, but you don't actually need to because they're just witnessing and notarizing your signature. Okay, so let's go to page 11. And Michelle, would you please read what to do after you complete 5 wishes? You can read all of those bullet points.
Did you say page 11?
I have page 11. What do you have?
My page 11 is witness statement.
It's our 12.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh yeah, I must have a different copy. Okay, so what?
Okay, I got it.
Okay, great.
Where did you want me to stop reading? I'm sorry, I wasn't.
You can read. I have 7 bullets. Do you have 7 bullets? Yeah, you can read all of those.
What to do after you complete 5 wishes. Make sure you sign and witness the form just the way it says in the directions. Then your 5 wishes will be legal and valid. Talk about your wishes with your healthcare agent, family members, and others who care about you. Give them copies of your completed 5 wishes. Keep the original copy you signed in a special place in your home. Do not put it in a safe deposit box. Keep it nearby so that someone can find it when you need it. Fill out the wallet card below. Carry it with you. That way people will know where you keep your 5 wishes. Talk to your doctor during the next office visit. Give your doctor a copy of your 5 wishes. Make sure it is put in your medical record. Be sure your doctor understands your wishes and is willing to follow them. Ask him or her to tell other doctors who treat you to honor them. If you are admitted to a hospital or nursing home, take a copy of your 5 wishes with you. Ask that it be put in your medical record. I have given the following people copies of my completed 5 wishes.
Excellent. Thank you. And then at the bottom of this page, although I'm not sure where, I should print out the PDF you have, but I have this little booklet. It has this in italics. It says 5 wishes is meant to help you plan for the future. It is not meant to give you legal advice. It does not try to answer all questions about anything that could come up. Every person is different. Every situation is different. Laws change from time to time. If you have a specific question or problem, talk to a medical or legal professional. And then it has underneath that a 5 wishes wallet card, which you can cut out and keep in your wallet, which says, here's my primary healthcare agent, here's my primary care physician, and my document is located at. So that's possible. Although, will they look in your wallet, if you get taken to the hospital? I don't know, maybe. I suppose it could happen. I have also emailed a PDF of my whole entire packet, including my 5 wishes, to my closest friends, so they have it. I also have put it in my Google Drive and shared it with my closest friends, so they have it like in a couple of different ways. They might have it in their email, they have it in their Drive, and then I have it, I have it stored. This is a little plastic thing that has a pocket, whatever these are called, pocket folders, and it has a little snap closed. And a lot of people put their 5 wishes and other death documents here and then stick them in their freezer, right?
Yeah, my mom has it in her refrigerator, and the EMTs know where the key to her house is.
So there's a magnet that has become popular, which says matters of life and death inside. And you can put it on, like most people have freezers at the top, but sometimes they're at the bottom. And the reason people put these in their freezer is because it's easy to grab. It's a sort of central location that the EMTs and other medical professionals know about. And you don't have to go hunting through someone's safe deposit box or files. That is complicated, right? So that's what people do. I live in this little cabin and I don't actually have a freezer, so I actually keep it in my files, but I feel pretty good about the redundancy of making it electronically available. And yeah, and then the plastic keeps it from, getting wet or other things. What else about? You could print a copy, the old fashioned way. You could print a copy of all your stuff after you have it notarized and give your healthcare agents and your executor a printed copy of everything. That's another way to do it. Old school style. Any other thoughts about that? The signing, the witnessing, the notary, the storage, and the giving copies to your people.
You said something before, Lee, that doing this, that first part especially, kind of nullifies if you have a living will or whatever. I mean, if you've covered the living will, this nullifies that. Is that right?
I mean, technically how it works is that any new documents that are dated in a new way sort of invalidate older documents.
Okay.
But, it's one of those tricky things. Like if it's a living will that was created by a lawyer and this is 5 wishes and they cover different things, like if it was really taken to a court of law, like, well, this doesn't cover this. And I don't know, I would just destroy stuff. That if you have stuff from the past and you don't want it anymore, I would just destroy it. And if you've already shared stuff on a drive or in an email, just, send a new one and say, this replaces anything that I have given you in the past. That's what I would do. All right. Big celebration. We just finished the 5 wishes. Woohoo! Yay! Big celebration. Anything else? Any other 5 wishes questions? You'll notice at the end of my addendum, I have this 1-page document called Navigating Visitors at the End of Life. And this document came out of my own frustration with dealing with Kimchi's end of life and how many people wanted to see her. And I swear to God, the phone was ringing off the hook. People were coming every single day. And Kimchi was an extrovert. She was an extra extrovert. And it was making me crazy because I felt like I didn't want to project my stuff onto her. Like, oh my God, she's so distracted. And I wanted to honor what she wanted, but it was also really hard for the caregivers to have all those people coming through too. So it's a really hard balance to find. And I just wrote these bullets for myself, this navigating visitors, like what I think I might want. I'm definitely more of I actually consider myself an extrovert, but not like that. And I actually like deep and heartful and soulful conversations. And so I think it would be different for me, what I would want. So I actually just wrote this out, like what I think I might want in terms of visitation. And it might be totally different than what I imagined, but I thought I'd give it a shot. So that's the last piece of the addendum.
That's a nice, just a comment on that. I'm reading through it. Do you I guess, how do you envision that this would be used? I would think it would be good for visitors to read something like this. Is that the intent?
Yeah, could be. Yeah, it could be, or the caregivers could read it and act accordingly. Yeah, I think either or both. I mean, there was one group that came to see Kimchi and she was like, I'll give you some donation. And they actually, took the donation. And I was like, ugh, that just feels wrong. Like, she's got a will, like you're not in it. And like, I don't want to like stop this woman from giving these people money. But at the same time, it's a very vulnerable time. Right. So it was tricky. It brought up some tricky ethical issues for me. Okay, so let's just take a breath. And go back to the categories of end of life paperwork, which is we've basically been through one category, which is this living healthcare, right? And we're still going to get through these specific ones today, as well as some after death, as well as we're going to touch on some financial. But I wanted to remind you with this context of all the end of life paperwork. Okay, so then the next piece we want to do is this dementia directive, right? So you can find this on my site. We're not going to go into this in depth like we did with the 5 wishes, but it's worth touching on. So standard advanced directives don't usually cover dementia. I didn't know this, but this is what the dementia folks are saying. And yet dementia is the #1 reason people lose the ability to guide their own care. So this is another redundant piece of paperwork. It looks a lot and sounds a lot like the 5 wishes, but it's specific to dementia. And families often do face sort of stressful and difficult decisions with dementia. So if there can be this in place to help guide them, it can be wonderfully supportive. You can include it as a supplement to your 5 wishes. And here are some of the questions, sort of like in wish 2, it's similar. There's this mild, moderate, and severe dementia. And each one of those has these questions, right? So here's your choices. I want to live as long as I can. I want full efforts to prolong my life. I want to restart my heart if it stops beating. That's one option. Another option is I want to receive treatments to prolong my life, but if my heart stops or I can't breathe, I wouldn't want to be resuscitated, basically.
Excuse me, where is this on your website?
So but right now we're looking at it on the screen, but on the website, it's under dementia directive. So it's on that resource page. Remember we talked about that resource page? I can put a link again. Let me find it. Is everybody else on the page? Can somebody drop a link in for her? The link is somewhere here.
Are we talking about reclaimingwisdom.com?
Yeah.
I dropped it in there. It's
awesome. Thank you, Villa. So it's that private link that's for participants of the workshop, and you'll see the dementia directive there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Right. So your other option would be, I want to prolong my life, but I wouldn't want these resuscitative measures if I took a turn for the worse. And my dementia would likely be worse if I survived, then this would not be an acceptable quality of life. And then another choice is to only receive care in the place where I'm living, and I don't want to go to the hospital, and I don't want to be resuscitated. If treatment such as antibiotics might keep me alive longer and could be given in the place I was living, I would want such care. But if I continue to get worse, I don't want to go to the emergency room or hospital. And that says the reason why I would not want the possible risks and trauma that can come from being in hospital. And then the last choice is to receive comfort-oriented care only, focus on relieving my suffering, and I don't want any care that would keep me alive longer. Right, so you can see it's reminiscent of the wish 2 questions, but it's specific. So if you feel drawn to that, if you have dementia in your family, I would take the time. Like this is also the same kind of template and they make it really easy, and they have a signature page and all of that. So go ahead and download it. Any questions on the dementia directive? Okay. So these are the bright, shiny forms. If I were with you, I would give you a copy, because right before the pandemic, I ordered like hundreds of them so I could give out to people. And now they're sitting in my file folder, but they are also on my website. You can download them. This pink one is the MOST, the MOST document. You probably heard of this one. And then this yellow one is the DNR, or do not resuscitate order. So again, a lot of this stuff might be redundant, but redundancy in these contexts is good. Institutions like hospitals speak this language, this MOST form and this DNR form. Bright colors help this stand out in your file. If you're in the hospital and you have a big file and there's lab work and there's notes and there's other things. Actually, they probably do that mostly electronically these days, but maybe there's still a clipboard and paper. I'm not actually sure. But anyway, the bright colors helps it stand out. And sometimes they would put this above your headboard, right? I've seen people who are dying at home and have this do not resuscitate order taped to their front door, taped to their refrigerator, or taped literally above their bed. And so the do not resuscitate order is super simple. It has an effective date, an expiration date, the patient's name, and then the signature of the attending physician. And, the do not resuscitate order, like I don't have one of these signed in my folder because I'm not dying, right? So like, it's kind of rare for a healthy person to go to their doctor and be like, hey, can you sign this do not resuscitate order? But I've heard some people said that they've done it just to have it in there. It's usually reserved for people who are in a process. Either they're going to go in for surgery and it might be risky, or they're in hospice and they don't want to be resuscitated. Let me show you this picture and then we can move back to the MOST. Some people go to this length, right? So getting a tattoo on their body. So there was this story that someone told me of, like, someone was going in for routine foot surgery, and she said, I don't want to be revived if something happens. And the physician's like, oh my God, you have a tattoo, a do not resuscitate tattoo. Let's cover that with gauze and tape because this is just a routine foot surgery. She was like, no, that's the whole point. Like, I don't want you to cover it with gauze and tape. So like, this is what we're up against, right? Like, to have our wishes honored, particularly around resuscitation. And even if we have the form and even if we have the tattoo, it's possible that we would get resuscitated because that's the sort of mode that this hospital and emergency room are in. But you can try everything you can to dissuade that. The MOST document stands for Medical Orders for Scope of Treatment. And this is sort of a repeat, right? But it gets specific. So it has a section A. Do you want cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR? You can say attempt it or do not attempt it. The section B is, do I have a pulse or am I breathing? I either want the full scope of treatment, I want limited interventions, or I want comfort measures, right? You start to see how, like, these are the frameworks that the hospitals put things in. So, and then section C is antibiotics. Section D is medically administered fluids and food. And then section E is this sort of consent section, which is who made these decisions? Did the patient, did the healthcare agent, did the doctor, etc. And then it gets signed by either the patient or a healthcare agent, and then the signature of the physician is on here. Also, there's directions on the back, and on the back also is this review date, who reviewed it, where's the signature, and who's the patient's representative. So you can sort of if people are getting transferred from facility to facility, or if they're in the hospital or nursing care home for a long period of time, you can use this same form and just keep updating it if there's any changes. Any questions about that form? Charlotte, you need to unmute, love.
The doctor doesn't have a copy of that, do they? We keep it in our folder.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the doctor takes a copy. It's a good question. Does anybody know the answer to that? I think that they take it, if you get admitted to an institution, they take it and put it in your chart, is my understanding. But until then, you would probably keep it with your documents.
Yeah, I have one, and it was updated this year when I had to go get a prescription filled. And I said, you know, I have this document, but it's not dated. So he dated it and filled it in with the review, no change.
Right. Okay.
Lee,
Yeah.
Lee, I have a question. And this might not be the appropriate time, but it keeps bugging me. And that is, many people have do not resuscitate or other orders that EMTs never adhere. And I've talked to EMTs and they say, our job is to resuscitate. That's it. We don't look at any of that.
I know. Wouldn't it be nice if we could call an alternative way of, you know, like, hey, I noticed that I'm having a heart attack and I'm okay with it. Like, could you just come and be with me? As opposed to, I think I'm having a heart attack, and like, then they're gonna like do all this stuff. I mean, it's such a blessing in some ways and such a hard thing in other ways. It's such a mixed bag. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that's why people go so far as to get a tattoo on their chest that says do not resuscitate, because clearly this is a hard thing to get people to comply with. I don't know what to say. I mean,
Is that because they don't have the documents? Or, I mean, it doesn't seem like that if they knew that they would just be breaking your own intention.
well, it's, you know, if someone's in hospice and they're at home and there's hospice people there and or a, you know, a fierce healthcare advocate and the DNR is there on the door or on the bed, like they're not going to resuscitate. Generally speaking, they're more cautious in those situations. But in any kind of other situation where they don't have paperwork to hand and it's an emergency, I mean, these people are pumped up on adrenaline, right? They're generally running in an ambulance system, and they come from a hospital culture that is like, you know, success equals survival. And so because success equals survival, they're going to try to be good at what they do. And so, and the same if you end up at emergency, right? Their job is to keep you alive, is how they interpret their job. It's just part of the culture. And so you have to sort of go out of your way to try to not get intervention. Unfortunately, I mean, it is the way it is. And until we have, I mean, I think that it's not one system changing. It's our whole culture's attitude about death. Until we have more death literacy, more death positivity, more death acceptance, none of our institutions are going to be able to change, right? And can we imagine the day where we're like, we call someone and we're like, we're having a heart attack, and could they say, what kind of response would you like from us? Mm-hmm. Would you like us to sit with you while you have a heart attack and die? Or would you like us to intervene? Like, wouldn't that be cool? You know, like, have the choice, not necessarily that we would have the presence of mind, but maybe we would. Maybe we would. So, you know, it's a sort of black and white, right or wrong, up and down, death or life culture that we're in, and we don't have a lot of nuance. So preparing, what y'all are doing and preparing for this is, you know, empowering some more of that, those shades of gray and those nuances.
I just printed off the most, and it has sample right across the front of it, like the actual paper copies that you were holding in your hand. Do they have sample on them?
No, because I ordered them. They have a seal. They have like this seal from the North Carolina state. So yeah, The ones on my website had the sample. Is that what it was? Yeah,
Yeah.
see if you can find one online that, I mean, the problem is they like this to be on this color paper.
Yeah.
So I
Sure, I understand.
Yeah, so I think they want you to order them. They're
Okay.
like 10 cents or something, like literally, that's how much they cost me. And they might have it, you know, at the hospital or who else would be like a local health, the local health and human services might have them, something like that. All right. Any more on any of that?
There's also such thing as a bracelet, right? That says DNR.
Yep, I've seen fancy bracelets. I've seen medical bracelets. I've seen people wear them on their wrists or their ankles. I mean, the tattoo is right there on your heart. So if they go to put the paddles on, they can't miss it, right? Yeah. Crazy that we have to tie ourselves into a pretzel about it. I am going to head into a little bit of a slideshow for you all about this sort of death care stuff. Is everybody feeling ready for that? Okay, and then we can take a break. Death is just a change of clothing. So I am going to tell you some about my philosophies about death and sustainability and green burial. And I want to say, by no means am I trying to say some way of doing it is better than others. I want you to feel fully sovereign and fully at choice with exactly what you want. And some people don't know this information, so I'm sharing it with you. And every choice you make is sacred. It doesn't matter what it is. So there's traditional burial, there's conservation or home burial, there's cremation, there's composting, there's donation, and it seems like there's more options every day. Wearing a mushroom suit, turning your body into mushrooms, really cool stuff going on. So every year, 55.3 million people die worldwide. And in the United States, every year, the chemicals and materials buried along with bodies in a conventional burial system include about 30 million board feet of hardwoods, 2,700 tons of copper and bronze, over 100,000 tons of steel, and over 1.5 million tons of reinforced concrete. Also buried are over 800,000 gallons of embalming fluid, primarily formaldehyde. Cremation, unfortunately, isn't a whole lot better in terms of its environmental impact. It releases more than 500,000 tons of greenhouse gases and also a significant amount of mercury emissions, right? Because people have mercury in their mouths. More than half of the people who die in the US each year are cremated. That's a pretty big statistic. And the process emits more than 500 estimated pounds of carbon dioxide per body. So there are green burial options. There's a movement worldwide, certainly in the United States, around conservation burial. There's a link on my resource page called the Conservation Burial Alliance. And you can also do Google search for conservation burial or green burial. We are so lucky in Western North Carolina, which I'm sorry, Michelle, you're not here, but I think the rest of us are nearby. We have the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, and they're in Mills River, and they do a really amazing job of having this beautiful piece of land that they're conserving, and then having plots for bodies and plots for ashes. Super minimal gravestone. They let it all go back wild. They do minimal mowing. It's not like some big grassy area, but they do have places where you can sit and walk in the woods there and visit your loved one. It's all GPS tracked. It's a beautiful place, and they give tours of the place. If you haven't been there, get some of your friends and go do a death and dessert. Go do a tour of the conservation burial, the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, and then go have death and dessert. It's really really lovely place. And Caroline Young, who started Center of End of Life Transitions, is the woman who started that. And it's just incredibly, we're so lucky to have it. And it's not super expensive. Like, I think it's $4,000, somewhere in the $4,000 range to buy a plot there. And they have ecological requirements, right? So you can't use a coffin. It's either a straight up pine box or a cardboard coffin or a shroud, something like that.
Just a note, the link on your website doesn't work for me. I mean, I can look it up, but just
Oh, the
just-
Carolina Memorial Sanctuary
Yeah.
link. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's also an urban death project that was at Western Carolina University, or still is, and some really cool stuff came out of that. The Recompose website was a woman that actually studied at Western Carolina and then started doing this like composting bodies. She's, I think, in Washington State. I think it's like $5,500 or $6,000 to compost your body, and then whatever your family gets back, some compost in a bucket or something. I don't know exactly how it works. The infinity burial suit, where you put this suit on the beloved who has died, and then like the mushroom spores are all in there, and so that when the body goes in the ground, like the mushroom uses the body and sprouts all these fungus and cool, cool fungus life is all existing there, which is very cool. There's donation of body resources on that resource page. Like there's body farms, which is interesting. Like this was being done at Western Carolina as well, where they bury a body, 6 feet and then 3 feet and then 1 feet and then 6 inches. And then they lay a body on the surface. And like all of that research is like, how do bodies decay? And so it's very cool, right? To figure out like what happens to a body when it's just right under the leaf litter of the forest, like what eats it and how long does it take to decay? And then they do this whole research and then they give the bones back to the family. So it's a way to sort of aid these alternative ways of decomposition and decay. Yeah, there's a link there, body donation by the American Association of Anatomy. I mean, you'll have to, if you are interested in that, you'll have to hunt around, but we do have one local, Western Carolina University. Home funerals and home burials, I'm going to talk about that because that's what I have the most experience with. And then donation, you can use a broker. You can sign up ahead of time, I guess, with the state. And you may not be able to have the body. You have to qualify, and you may or may not be able to have the body at the funeral. So those are some things to think about and look into when you're thinking about donation. So the Center of End of Life Transition, which are my mentors, give a home funeral and death care class. I'm going to put this in the chat box. Hopefully this link works. Somebody check it for me. They taught us how to do home funerals and home funeral care. This is the story of Kimchi's death process mostly. There's some other pictures sprinkled throughout. Oops, I just sent it to Michelle. I meant to send it to everyone. There we go. Okay. So Kimchi died 8 o'clock at night, and we had been caring for her on a rotation of caregivers. She was dearly beloved to us and many people in the community, as well as many people in Asheville and outside the community. Great, the link works. Okay, good. So the next day, and we did this for all 5 of our beloveds that had died in our community, or actually in 2 cases, we had to get the bodies back from the morgue. Remind me to tell you about that. So we spent, probably about 5 hours the next day after her death. We laid her out on a massage table. We washed her body. We sang to her. We told the story of her life as we were with her and with each other. And we did a couple of ceremonies. There's folks in our community who study this Mayan tradition, and they raise corn, specific seeds of corn and specific varieties of corn for someone's birth and someone's death. And so we had this corn kernel that we stuck in her belly button, and then had this hand woven yarn that we wrapped around her body as we told the story. And it's just so incredibly beautiful and honoring of the person. And also, I think I had told you the oxytocin that flows in the body during the dying time is pretty high. And also at this death and these 3 days of really sacred time with each other. I think I mentioned I have lived in intentional community for 25 years, and I don't remember ever feeling as bonded to people in community. I mean, there's lots of beautiful things in community. There's also lots of conflict and lots of challenges, but there's something about the death process that erases all of the petty day-to-day stuff and put us in sort of a liminal magical place. So, and then it ripples out, everybody in that room. This was the group of women that were tending her. And there was also everybody on the outside, people digging the grave and people feeding us and feeding the community. And it's sort of that beauty and sacredness sort of ripples out. And so ceremony, ceremony is for the living, some would say. But I believe also, and we were taught this by our teachers, Ruth and Caroline, is that she was there hearing and seeing and being with that process. A part of her was there. And, just like birth, encouragement and softness and relatedness and engaging with her as she was in the biggest transition of her life. We had these 3 days of lying in state, and this is a picture of the altar with kimchi at it. We had lots of flowers. We never left her alone. Someone always was attending and sleeping there with her. We refreshed the dry ice every few hours. The candles never go out, and always refreshing the flowers. And so we had visiting hours, which was pretty much all day, every day, except for the sleeping hours. And plenty of people were there sleeping also. It's a little bit of a time out of mind. Here is a dear friend, Rainbow, who's next to the body. Here's another example of another beloved dead in front of the altar. This is Patricia Allison, who also died at Earth Haven. This is a mother with her child visiting the grief altar with Chuck Marsh, who died as well in that 2-year period of time. And from my perspective, it's really healthy for children to be part of a death process. It normalizes death, it educates about the cycles of life and death, and it encourages our love and relationship to continue with the dead. And it builds deaf community. So children growing up in this environment, I think, can have a better chance at creating a deaf culture. This is we had 3 altars in every space that we set up. One is the grief altar that contains the body, with a forgiveness altar, which is all in blue, and an ancestor altar. So we brought pictures of Kimchi's ancestors and friends and folks who had passed, and anybody who was part of the process of the funeral could also bring photos of their own beloved dead and their ancestors. So that's the forgiveness altar, and this is the ancestor altar. This was a group of mostly guys doing the grave digging, which was another very sacred process. Digging the grave by hand is a very embodied thing to do. And, one could say works the muscle of service for the dead. Here's another photo. This is a gathering outside of our big communal house called the Council Hall at Earth Haven, where people gathered for a funeral. I don't actually remember whose funeral this was, but we had lots of attendance at all of our funerals. And here's a gathering where someone was doing a ceremony. I think this might have been Chuck's funeral. This is a few of us. When Kimchi died, we had laid all her clothes and books and artwork and belongings out in this sort of common area. And then we all put on some of her clothes. She wore these incredibly bright colors and really artful prints. So we were all dressed up in her clothes, and someone took a picture of us, which was super sweet. And And so then the body, on the third day, the body is prepared to be carried to the grave site. And the shroud is wrapped around the body. And in most of these cases, these 5 deaths, there was only a shroud. We didn't have a box of any kind. And really the flowers are tied onto the body. And then we have this canvas tote that has like 5 sets of handles on each side. And so people who aren't as strong are able to carry this, 1, because there's not a heavy coffin, and 2, because there's more handles. So this was actually all women carrying this body, which in, a traditional situation probably wouldn't be strong enough to do. But we use the tote over and over again. We don't bury the tote in the ground. We take the tote out from the body when we lay it by the gravesite, and we use it over and over again. This is a group of people carrying Patricia Allison's body to the grave with a group behind them. And this is a picture of Kimchi, her body by the gravesite. It's actually on the tote right there. It's wrapped in the shroud with sort of handmade weavings, keeping the fabrics all together and the flowers on. And this is another body by the graveside. I think this must have been Chuck's body. Beautiful colors. Here's a photo of the group sitting outside around the hand dug hole with Kimchi's body there. And this is her family and some friends lowering her body with these strings of fabric down into the ground. And I hope that I can play this for y'all. This is a video we buried. So Kimchi died on February 16th. This was 2017. And her birthday was February 20th. So she was buried on her birthday. And because that was 3 days. So we had the 17th, 18th, 19th, and then we buried her on the 20th. And so this is a little video. And folks are piling in the dirt, and there's a local musician, Kaylin Campbell, some of you may know, playing the fiddle, and folks start saying happy birthday to her.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, so, and then the mound gets piled up, and we decorated it with flowers and eventually planted a tree there. Yeah, so I will end there, and we will.
Just a question about that. At Earth Haven, are there particular sites, or you just, buried people and put trees on them and that sort of?
Yeah, let me stop sharing so we can share a little bit, and then we can take a break later. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's not an easy answer because we don't have unlimited space for burying bodies, and folks were dying pretty quickly during this 2-year period of time, and we were like, what are we doing? Like, what? And then not only that, but it took a tremendous amount of resources from the community to hold these funerals, because lots of people would come, and then there was food, and then there was all this interface with the person's family. And my dear friend Nikki Ann, she sort of did this whole calculation of like what it cost us as a community to put on these home funerals, and it was like thousands and thousands of dollars, right? So like you think like, oh, these funeral homes, they charge a lot, and sure they do, but it takes a lot. Like there's a lot. I'm gonna mute you. There's some background noise. So yeah, we have yet to come up with a community policy around burying in our common spaces, and there's only so much common space to go around. Right now we have 3 people in one cemetery. Chuck, right? We have 3 people in one cemetery that's in this like a common orchard area. And then we have 1 person in a farm field that's sort of part of a neighborhood, and then another person in another like campground area in another neighborhood. So it's too complicated to go into here because you all won't have these issues because we have these like neighborhood allocations and then common space allocations. But we're still working it out. And I mean, on one hand, I think we'd love for people to be buried on the land if they want to be. And like, what's our policy? What's our land use provisions? How are we going to think about this? It's just ongoing questions. Yeah. So
Lee,
what?
in the place you talked about, the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, can you be cremated and be there, or is it only bodies?
Yes, you can be cremated. I think it's a different price. I think it's less of a price, and you get, you know, a little hole that you put the urn in, or you know, the cardboard box. That I think they like even don't allow urns. I think they're like it has to be in sort of a biodegradable box or something. And even if you don't put anything in the ground, but you put a marker there and you spread the ashes around, I think that's okay. They have, you know, a whole bunch of information on their site. But yes, they do take cremations and they do take bodies, both. Mm-hmm. So what came up for y'all when you saw all that slideshow?
I feel that it's probably very healing to be with your loved one for those 3 days. And by the third day, you're probably ready to let them go for sure.
I love that. Yeah, it sort of aids in the natural cycle of grieving and releasing. I think it does. I think when we have the body there, I think it really does something to, you know what, our nervous system to help us for acceptance, something like that. Yeah.
I think I was struck by the abundant beauty that was created around them. And it's just so unlike what we typically do. It would seem to me that just creating that beauty is a part of the processing of this person leaving for the people who are with them.
I love that. Yeah, that the process of creating beauty, creating it all, creating and then creating beauty is part of how we weave the goodbye and part of how we weave the story of our own grief and letting go. Yeah, I think you're right. I think all of these pieces are instrumental. And when we sort of sterilize the funeral ceremony, I think we lose something.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me when my grandparents died, they died in separate years. I think like 86 and 92 or something. My mother called us. She has 3 sons at different times or at the same time, I don't remember, to come and visit. You know, and she just had a slow process about this. And my parents are from Lithuania and sort of I don't know, maybe it's more the tradition back there. But although there wasn't a colorful ceremony like you were showing us, there was something really beautiful about experiencing that and just having private time, seeing somebody who's been in your life. So I love the idea that, you know, this community that you're sharing and trying to grow is helping to make that more common, because it's, yeah, there's something magical about it and maybe necessary.
Yeah, it's hard to convey in words, but I think you get a little bit of the sense of it from the slides, which is like there's the sacred. I mean, that word sacred just keeps coming up, and like it's just so deeply sacred and impactful to be part of that process. And so, yeah, I mean, Caroline and Ruth from the Center of End of Life Transitions, they have a whole slideshow and a whole process, and they have guided dozens and dozens of people through home funerals that wouldn't be quite like this because this is community based, but even just having the body in your home for 3 days, and then having beloveds come, you know, living loved ones come and be with it. I think it does. I think it's transformative. And again, this is not because I'm advocating for you to do this. This is just goes back to some of my death philosophies, which are death is a gift, we are the pioneers, and what else is possible. So I'm just, giving you an example of one avenue of what else is possible, because we're creating it as we go. And I mean, I've had people say, for example, Chuck Marsh was a very well-known person. He lived in the mountains for, more than 50 years. And he was really well known in many communities, certainly permaculture, agriculture, horticulture, and really well loved. And people said, that funeral was one of the most impactful experiences of my life, right? Where we would move the body from lying in state for 3 days into a bigger area. And then the body was right there with us as we were, in its shroud with its flowers. But as we were talking about this person's life, this person's death, sharing stories, laughing, being together, and the openness about death, really, the openness and inviting people into our process around metabolizing, digesting the death process. I have an article on my resources link that is an article that I wrote after the death of a child. We had an accidental death of an 18-month-old child in our community, which was very tragic and really just transformational. His death, Rowan's death, started this 2-year period where the 5 deaths, including his. And so I wrote an article about our 3-day process where I feel like we went into this collective descent into the deepest grief I've ever seen happen collectively, shock, grief. And his parents were held in this beautiful way. And then at the end of those 3 days was the funeral. And so all these people came from the outside world, and they hadn't been in that container. They hadn't been with us in that 3-day container, which went on 24/7 for 3 solid days. I mean, like, we did not stop the fire. We were all hours of the night wailing, grieving, holding the parents. I mean, the whole community stopped and held space. And so people were coming in for the funeral, and they were shocked. Like, you could see the difference between their faces and our faces, because we had 3 full days to metabolize, digest, integrate, process. And not that it was easy and not that we were done, but that we were transformed over the course of those 3 days. And they came in like, it was actually over the weekend of Leaf. So a lot of people had been at Leaf Festival, and which is a big music and arts festival here. So they came to the funeral, and they had no way to metabolize and process this experience. Even if they weren't that close to the family, you could just see the horror in their faces. They couldn't figure out how to process it. And that experience really helped me understand the important role of the community in processing grief. And so you can read that article on my resources page. Any other thoughts before we take a break?
Slightly unrelated, but I'm fascinated being buried at sea, and I just looked it up, and apparently it's legal. You just have to EPA has a general permit. You don't have to sign something. You just have to be dumped 3 miles out, and you can't have plastic or other junk that won't break down.
I love it.
I'm reading it right. You can add that to the resources.
So they just like push you overboard kind of thing?
Looks like it. I haven't gotten the details of it, but apparently there's a general permit by the EPA that says if you're at least 3 miles out, placement of human remains in ocean waters 3 nautical miles. A couple different things in here, but it looks like it's permitted.
I love it. I love it.
I think that the question was just answered. The question I was going to pose: how do I find out about home burials when I'm not part of your community? I don't live in Asheville area.
Yeah, let me go to the resource page and guide you through it for a second. All right. All right, let me go find the link that Vidula put for me here. Okay. Okay, so if you go to the link that Vidula put in the chat box, it will take you to that page that I sent you in that initial email, which is the end of life links resources.
Yeah.
And if you scroll down to disposition of body, there's a bunch of documents there. And then there's a section called home funerals and home burials.
Okay.
There's a Home Funeral Alliance, and then a page called Buried at Home in all 50 states. And there's also a page called How to Have a Home Burial. So, and there's books you can take out of the library or buy. I'm not an expert at this stuff, but I do know that it's way more possible to bury at home than you might think. Oh, and I was going to tell you about the morgue. So the morgue is not really that familiar with people pulling up in a Subaru and being like, hey, give me that body. But it's possible. They are very familiar with, bodies. So if you don't die at home, and like 3 of our people died at home and 2 of our people died in the hospital, and in both cases, we had to go get the body. We wanted to go get the bodies back from the morgue to bring them. And so the people at the morgue are confused by this because their usual process is somebody from the funeral home comes with their, whatever those cars are, hearse, I guess, and picks up the body. And that's what they're familiar with and what they're used to. But they absolutely can release the body to loved ones. And this is where the Center of End of Life Transitions, which I have a lot of links on my resource page, they're local, but you might find an advocate. Basically, if Michelle, if you, in your area or for anybody in any area, if you have a death, a positive death or a conscious dying advocate, there might be someone in the community who has experience with this, which is they go to the morgue and they say, hey, I'm releasing this body. And the more people might be like, I can't release the body to you. And they'll be like, yes, you can. Here's the law. I printed it out for you. Like, I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. Like, the body's coming with me. And, sometimes you can have that canvas carrying thing, or they could have a gurney where they wheel the body. But absolutely, you can have access to your beloved's body and have your own home funeral. So just, you might want to check out those resources. So our mentors, Caroline and Ruth, they do this for people all over Western North Carolina. And what I like to tell people is, if you plan to use their services, they're not registered funeral, what do you call those? Funeral directors. They're not certified funeral directors, but they're advocates. And so they don't actually send you an invoice, but they do tremendous service and support to families of people who are dying or dead. And so I often encourage people, like, if you're going to use them and use their services, make sure to leave a note for your executor to gift them something, because they do this service work in the world and they're Buddhists and they don't have a lot of money. And it's really important to keep, I think of them as, a community asset. So we always gift to them when someone in our community dies, and they're there helping us do a home funeral, helping us do a washing of the body, helping us do any of these things, any advice. We always are gifting and tithing to them because they're such a crucial part of our death community. So that's that with the morgue. If you run into that at all, I'd be curious to hear what your experiences is. I haven't actually been one of the people at the doorway of the morgue, being like, give me that body. But in both the cases that I mentioned, we got the bodies home. And so Ruth and Caroline are excellent at that, particularly Ruth. So if you want your body at home, please don't take no for an answer. Find out what your resources are. Okay, any other thoughts, questions about this aspect before we take a break? Okay, I'm thinking there's no homework. There's nothing for you to do during this break. So I'm thinking we can do a 25-minute break. So do you want to come back at 10 after 4? Do what you need to do and come back then? Awesome. Great. See you soon. Okay, welcome back. I'm gonna wait for another minute to see if Michelle and Marianne are here. I am going to send you all out into breakout rooms to discuss your after death options, what you feel inclined towards, how your mind may have changed in these 2 days of conversations. You may be uncertain, you may want more information, but just anything that's alive for you around after death considerations. So, and
I have a question.
please.
I'm a organ donor and on the driver's license. You know how that works out.
That is a good question. I think if you die in the hospital, I think they have to take you pretty immediately to harvest because they need those organs in good shape. Does anyone know? Has anyone experienced that directly with a loved one? I don't know. It's a good question to research, this idea of like, what happens to my body after the organs are donated? Like, can my family have the body after that? Really good questions. And then I don't know the answer. All right, so I'm not going to send you with your buddy necessarily. You'll just be with another person, and go ahead and take 10 minutes to talk about that, and then I'll pull you all back. Hello. Hey. Big day, huh? Meow, meow, meow. Well, I'll come back. Did you all have enough time, even though you had 3 of you? Good.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Ed and I are similar in some of our
Desires.
leanings. Yeah.
Mhm.
What are you all wanting for after death?
I think, I've moved from cremation to green burial. It feels, and we're going to explore that option, obviously, but it appeals to me more and more.
But we also both want to be on dry ice. And
Yeah, definitely.
I love that you shared the ones that you shared from your community, because it inspired some thoughts around some rituals and things that I want to include.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this great ritual of getting this cardboard coffin, and particularly when people know that they are dying, and set up the cardboard coffin in the living room and have a bunch of markers and have people come over and decorate the coffin, right? Like, what a beautiful, like you're watching people say their goodbyes to you as they're in your house decorating the coffin. Like, what a beautiful opportunity to like sort of have a little witness of your own,
I had a friend who died last year, or it was the year before. I don't know if you know him, Doug Silsby.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was a part of a Buddhist community.
Okay.
And this was after his death, that they had the home open, and he was on dry ice and people came over. But his wife was an artist, and she had I think it was a wooden box set up in her art room, and lots of different materials, markers, paints, anything that people could decorate it with. And it was a really lovely idea. Lovely.
Glitter and collage and paints. Yeah.
Another thing,
Where did he end up being buried?
that I don't know, because he probably got cremated.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing they did, because they knew he was dying, is they had a quilting collective, and they had people create a square for
That's
quilts.
sweet.
And then somebody put it together, and when he was dying, he had that quilt with him. And then on his when he was on ice and people were coming to visit him, I finally got to see this finished product, and it was a really lovely touch. It was beautiful.
Beautiful. Other thoughts from other people? What's come up for you in this whole discussion about what you might want for your after death?
Well, I really liked from the pictures that you shared, the participation of children. And I would say that, decorating the box would be something that children can do. And I would think that it brings some natural closure for them, because children are oftentimes in the dark, that all of a sudden grandma or grandpa are not there. And that would help to prepare them and help bring closure.
Right, help them talk about it in advance. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
being a child, and I came from a very old school traditional Italian family, and the wakes and the black and the mourning and the secrecy and the funeral homes, and I was just like, people, I can handle this. Like, I'm not sure why you're not talking to me about this. Like, this is like your issue, not my issue. I mean, especially when I didn't even know the person, like, it's such a great opportunity to talk to kids about death when it's not too complicated for them.
Right.
So yeah, I'm a part of this men's group. I've been in for like 30 plus years, and we've known each other. We're all older now, and we talk about death a lot. And this is probably not practical, and I don't even know if we'll end up doing it, but we've talked about making our own pine box coffins together.
I love that. Yeah, or even, making what we did in community too was we made a pine box that different people have used, that we don't end up burying it in the ground. We used it for transport, or we used it for the setup, but then we put the person in with the shroud and we just kind of reused the pine box, which sort of is cool, right? Like, and like you can write each person's name on it that used it. It's sort of like a community resource. But I love that idea. Even if you use you have your own, that you build them together, or you share in the building of, the stories of the building. I love that. What else? What other ideas have emerged for y'all?
Well, Jane and I talked a lot about children, and that really cemented it for me with the 3-day holding period. I was not really concerned for me in my death, but now I realize that the 3 days is really critical for others.
I remember talking to Ruth, my mentor, about like, how do you know when the spirit is gone? And she said, it's different. Like, it's different. Some spirits leave early on in the 3 days, and others wait to the very last minute. Like she said, there's something like, even in a dead person, there's color in the face for a while, and then at some point the face is ashen. She's like, she said, I think of that as the transition, when the color is no longer there. And I think it was maybe Kimchi's death, when we were in the burial ground, we were by the graveside, and she was like, there it goes, like, and there was a bird overhead, and Kimchi, of course, waited until the last minute, just because she is that kind of personality. She wanted to be there for the whole process. And just that notion that they're with us, that for 3 days they're there on some level. It's hard to put into concept for our physical realm beings, but that their presence is there. It changes everything for me. It changes the stories, it changes the songs, it changes the presence. So again, not trying to encourage you to believe one thing or another. I'm not a Buddhist myself, but I have been informed by these traditions, and they, it's just more of an intuition thing. It just feels like a lovely thought, and it might be worth playing with. What else? Anything else? Vidilid, were you going to speak?
Well, I was going to say something that's sort of silly. I was sharing that I had a scuba diving accident where I was pretty serious, and for a long time afterward, I was seriously claustrophobic. And even now, although I've sort of always leaned toward cremation, I think I like it because while I'm alive, I don't have this idea of soil being put around me and me being in a tight, closed space. So that's just sort of a funny anecdote and strange thing to think about. But ultimately, for me, I think as long as it's something that's natural and not adding to more, toxicity to the earth, I think the idea of, all this basically junk we're putting in cemeteries and toxic waste is outrageous. So, the simpler the better. And I think seeing what you guys did there and what other people are doing, it's exciting to see that this culture is starting to come back to earlier ways or earlier, simpler approaches.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, so I can see why the buried at sea might be appealing, because it's vast. Yeah. I mean, look into it. I think that's fascinating. That whole Native American idea of like, putting the person in the canoe and just like pushing them out to sea. I mean, that's not the same as what you're saying, but there's a similar feeling about it. Yeah. Anything else? Any other thoughts?
One thing we talked about was just not realizing how many other options there are, because you think of dying, and then you're put in a coffin and you have a ceremony somewhere, maybe in a church or maybe not. And then you're, then you're in the ground or you're cremated. But it's really nice to think about all these other options, particularly the mushroom suit. I love that one.
Yeah, there's some great articles on this site every time I find one. Yeah, the composting, the body. There was this whole thing somebody just sent me from the last class, which was like, what was it? Let me look. They put it on here. Oh, to answer your question, Michelle, the Center of End of Life Transitions. Let me find where they are here. There's the folks but they wouldn't be coming to you because they are in Western North Carolina. I wonder if when my website got updated, if the link didn't stay updated.
I just wanted to check out their site to see if
Oh,
there's some resources or videos that I could send to my mom or things like that. So the Center for End of Life Transition.
Their website is ceolt.org. And I think that link I'm telling you about didn't make it through my website transition. So I'll send it to you.
I just put it in the chat.
Oh, great. Thanks. It was some like, and I think you'd appreciate this, Vidila. It was some alternative to cremation. I'll have to find it. And when I send you all the evaluation or the recording or something, I will created remains. Here it is. SpaceX. Oh no, that's not it. It's something different. Anyway, I'll find it in my email. And it was like this whole alternative way of cremating that was less impactful. So I'll send that out to y'all and I'll update my website. So thank you all for sharing about all of that. And I want to encourage you to pull out your checklist. We probably could have done this before the break, but we'll catch up, which is there anything from earlier today, before we move into yet another form, which we're going to do right now, but before we move into any other form, is there anything from your checklist that you want to update around wishes 3, 4, and 5? The signature page, the notary page, the storage page, the sending to friends, healthcare agents, family members by email or drive, the most form, the DNR form, the dementia form. So that was a lot we covered, and some of that stuff may already be on that checklist. So just look down that checklist and see if you can put in some notes or some dates that you'd like to have sort of benchmarks for having these things done. And we're going to have another opportunity to be with our buddies at the end of the day today, but just go ahead and update that so you're up to speed before we do another paper. Oops. Whoops. All right. I think you're still working on that. I'll give you another minute.
Lee, is there a source somewhere for the cardboard coffin you were talking about?
That's a great question.
Maybe it's a Googling thing.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, certainly the Center of End of Life Transitions would know, and I don't have a link. So if you find like an easy link, let me know. I can put it on my resource page. It's a great question. All right. So you'll have more time to work on your checklist if you haven't fully finished, but at least it's in your mind. So this slide is talking about the paperwork or forms for your after death care. So I'm going to go over the first two. One is declaration for disposition of physical body, which is a unique form you're not going to find anywhere else. And the death certificate, which is a bit confusing, so I want to talk about that. But there's other forms. The authorization for cremation. The reason they have an authorization for cremation is that for so long, traditional burial was what everybody did, and that whenever anybody in the family wanted to do cremation, sometimes the family didn't know what to do or didn't want to allow it or were sort of freaked out by it. And so there's this whole authorization form for that. Also, if you have a receipt for I don't know, a cemetery plot or a receipt for a pre-purchase of a cremation, you want to probably keep that with your end of life paperwork. If you have organ donation forms or a body, so say you made an arrangement with Western Carolina University to do their decay and decomposition study and you committed your body, you'd definitely want to keep those forms with your paperwork and maybe even update your 5 wishes, like the wish 5, which is like, this is what I want to happen after my death. You might want to update your addendum. Any plans that you make it really easy for the people in your life to find that paper trail and those contacts. So if you have an email, if you did a body donation and you have an email confirming that, you might send that to your person. You know, the healthcare agent's role ends at your death, right? And so the new person, which may be the same person, would sort of take over. So I would like to go now to the declaration regarding disposition of physical body. And this is a form that that was created by the Center of End of Life Transition folks. And so you can create something like this. If you don't like the way it's worded, you could just download it into a Word document and change it. And I would love to just read it through because it's a particular flavor, particular set of belief systems that may not resonate with everybody, but it's what I have done and what several people I know have done. So again, like it's a template that you can change for the belief systems that you hold. So let's just go ahead and read through. Is anybody up for reading again? I think everyone had a chance today. Vidila, great. If you want to read the first, second, and third paragraphs would be great.
Okay. I fill in the blank after thoughtful deliberation, being of sound mind and more than 21 years of age, in exercise of my paramount right to direct the manner of disposal of my physical body after my death, and in order to state clearly my direction, do willfully and voluntarily make this declaration and do hereby declare, first, autopsy is a violation of my spiritual convictions and religious beliefs, and therefore no autopsy shall be performed upon my physical body under any circumstances. Second, After death has taken place, my physical body shall not be embalmed or in any way artificially preserved except by means of refrigeration, air conditioning, ice, or dry ice. Third, for the period of 72 hours after death has taken place, I request that blank name and phone number take custody of my body, acting as my death care agent, and exercise their right to care for and dispose of my body. If blank is not available for this, then I request that friends or my religious group be allowed to care for and dispose of my body. If this is not possible because of the laws of the state, I request that my family, friends, and acquaintances have access to the presence of my physical body in order to take part in prayer, read spiritual literature, and perform any practices associated with care of the body after death. I request that these activities and my funeral arrangements be supported by.
Okay, great. Thank you. And again, this autopsy thing and the embalming thing is very Buddhist, right? So they created this form for people who want very little intervention. May or may not be your belief system, but it gives you something to push against if you want to create something like this. Yeah. Jane, would you read 4, 5, 6, 7?
I can only see up to 4.
No. Okay. Does somebody else have it printed out or they want to read it? Charlotte, please.
The fourth one, I request that my family, friends, and religious groups make the following funeral services arrangements. Fifth, no fewer than 72 hours after my death, my physical body shall be buried or cremated. My remains shall be disposed of as follows. Sixth, the directions herein expressed are based upon my deeply held philosophical conviction, religious belief, and spiritual practice. I hereby request blank to guide and support my family and friends as necessary in the fulfillment of these directions. Seventh, I have made firm and settled commitment while competent to express the directions stated herein, which is of great importance to me. I request that my directions as herein expressed be given precedence and controlling force over all other interests by any judge or court or any public authority. I request that my relatives and friends respect the directions expressed herein.
Wonderful, thank you. And you can see the back is just, this acknowledgement, the dates, the signature, the witnesses, and the notary. So this is another form, right? That I think those of us who want to have a process that's sort of outside the conventional process just feel good having this form because it's really clearly stating these things that we want that are sort of not usually done. So again, redundancy, having it be signed and notarized, and keeping it with your documents. And again, feel free to change any of that wording to more closely align with your beliefs.
So this would be where you'd put something like you wanted a mushroom suit, so they wouldn't think you had lost your mind, basically, right? Okay. And then having it notarized, would you recommend that it go right with your will or something? Or
I keep all of my whole packet together. My 5 wishes, my addendum, my disposition, my will, and any of the ancillary addendum like paperwork, I keep it all together. And I put it in, I made one big PDF out of it so that it can be electronic. All right, any other questions about declaration of disposition? Again, there are other forms on the website. The authorization for cremation's on there, the green burial links, the composting articles, and I will definitely get you that alternative to cremation, the donation of body. So if you decide, I'm really turned on by this donation of body thing, I'm going to explore that. They're going to have their own forms. Right, that you fill out whatever arrangements you make, and then they probably have all those forms in duplicate so you can keep them with your paperwork, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. The next piece of paperwork I wanted to show you is this death certificate. And I encourage you to fill out some of this death certificate. This is what it looks like, just like that, like it looks on the slide. And you start with a regular old piece of paper like this. And then what you do when the person dies is you bring this piece of paper to the county. They stick it on their copy machine and shrink this down. And then they put in this fancy green paper into the copy machine slot where the paper goes. And they make copies of this thing and they put it on this fancy paper. And then they charge you $15 a piece for these. What a racket. And the reason I encourage you to get a copy of this. This is from North Carolina Vital Records. And so in your case, Michelle, and in other states, you're going to need that particular state's copy, because there's some questions on here that if you die in the presence of your friends, they may not know the answers to these questions. So like your age at your last birthday, your birth date, and then it has your father's name, your mother's name, and the place you were born. I think birthplace, date of birth, birthplace, marital status, social security number, father's name, and mother's name. And if you're dying in a group of friends, they may not know this information. So I just have one of these things filled out. Obviously, I'm not putting the date of my death in there, but I'm filling out the pertinent information so that when my people are dealing with this, they don't have to go scrambling around looking for this information. I just try to make it easy.
Hey, Lee, don't the doctors have to sign off on the cause of death and that kind of thing?
Yeah,
On the
so
certificate?
either the coroner, right? So if someone's died in their house and they're clearly dead, they can call the coroner and the coroner can come and confirm that they're dead, right? If there doesn't need to be some kind of investigation. And if the person is under hospice care and they die at home, then the hospice nurse or doctor will come out and that's a standard procedure. They just come out and listen to the heart, take the pulse, confirm that the death has happened, sign off, and then they give the reason for death. So this is very common procedure in at-home hospice. If you're in the hospital administration or doctors or whatever will sign this form. But yes, you need it signed off. They won't accept it at the county if you haven't had the signature. Now they also have the funeral director on here, which you can just waive all that if you're doing your own home funeral. You don't need that stuff. Like what we did for Kimchi is we said home burial and put the city and state, and we didn't have any problems with that. The county just really wants to see the signatures at the bottom, which are the certifier of death.
So who did you all put as the certifier of death in that case?
It was the hospice doctor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we type in death certificate and the county where we live, they should be able to supply us with that form?
It's by state, and you can find, if you're in North Carolina, you can find that one on my website.
Okay.
Yep, death certificate. Federal, I found a federal one, which is a CDC provided, and then a North Carolina Vital Records. Maybe the federal one will be fine in other states. I don't know. But even if you fill out the form with your pertinent information, then it turns out not to be fine, anyone can get another form and just transfer the information. The important part is that they have your core basic information. All right. So Joan Baez says, you don't get to choose how you're going to die or when. You can only decide how you're going to live now. So you want to revisit your checklist again. And if you want to do any of these forms, like the disposal, the declaration regarding disposition of physical body after death, go ahead and put your intentions, your dates, timeline for that. And if you wanted to do the bare bones death certificate, go ahead and stick that in your checklist as well. If you're going to research anything, research this Body Farm stuff or other things, go ahead and add that into your checklist and give yourself a rough date for when you'd like to do that by.
Lee?
Yes, ma'am.
I had a kind of crazy thing happen that no one had given instructions as to what to be done with my parents' ashes. So I was thinking that it would be really helpful if I have all this other stuff in place to give whomever, the feeling of, what to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious where that might end up, where that should go. Got any idea?
I think that could work with this declaration, right? Where it says under, which one is it? Where I will be, the fifth line, no fewer than 72 hours after my death, my physical body shall be buried or cremated. My remains shall be disposed of as follows.
Okay, thank you.
And again, back to the 5 wishes in wish 5, it might be a great place to do a summary like, hey, there's this other form, it's called Declaration Regarding Disposition. Please see that form for more details. Yeah. Good. Okay. Take a breath with me. Y'all are awesome. Okay, so I'm going to give a couple of caveats before we go into the financial overview, because this is not my area of expertise. I do not in any way want to be perceived as giving advice or, legal or financial or in any way. And one of my pieces of caveat is like, what have you all seen a lawyer? And if so, what did that lawyer cost per hour? For example, what do lawyers charge per hour? Yeah, Charlotte.
So mine charged $300 for the first hour when we went through whatever documents I had or questions that I had, things that he advised me on. And then I wanted to do a trust so that the things in my estate, which are minimal, would not go to the government in the event that I would end up, in a nursing home. And so he suggested that in the trust, my house and my car would be right of survivorship with my children. And then he drew up the deed for that. He did a will, he did the trust, he did the deed, power of attorney, all of that together, when I had no more headache about any of it, was like $1,500.
Right. Okay, great.
That was very reasonable.
Yeah, so you have a lot to offer. That's great. So I just want to compare that cost, $300, to the cost of this workshop, which was $40 for 8 hours, which turns out to be about $5 an hour. So you are getting $5 an hour advice. That's not really advice, but I just want to put this all in context for you. Because I've had people take this workshop and be like, I think we should have a lawyer on this workshop. I'm like, well, you're going to be paying a lot more than $40 for this workshop if we suddenly have a lawyer on this workshop. So here is the financial overview slide. It's a little bit confusing, but this, again, it's not meant to give you the whole kit and caboodle. It's just a very brief overview. So the beneficiary, so there's beneficiary, transfer on death, payable on death, and will. Those are the categories that I have. And Charlotte brings up a really good point that she might be able to say more about the trust, but let's just give that a second before I get there. The super simple thing you can do is go to all your financial institutions and find out what happens upon your death and make it how you want it to be. So for example, this word beneficiary, it applies to IRAs, life insurance, annuities, and retirement plans. When you have someone filled in as a beneficiary on any of these financial accounts, it should transfer on death, which means they need to provide one of these death certificates and say, my dad or my mom or my whoever died, I'm the beneficiary. It should go right to that person. There's no need for probate. The beneficiary becomes the owner. It's settled in 72 hours. There's a certificate after the death certificate is received. Now, people usually use the word beneficiary to sort of mean the same thing as transfer on death and payable on death, so they'll know what you mean. But technically, transfer on death is for non-retirement accounts and investment accounts, same sort of thing. The assignee becomes the owner. It transfers on death. No probate is needed. It's settled in 72 hours. And payable on death is usually cash, money market, and checking and savings. I don't know exactly how you do it for cash accounts. I mean, you know, cash is what, in a safety deposit box or something? I don't know the details of that, but it's the same thing with a money market and a checking and savings account. The payable on death is just like a beneficiary. So here's the trick. When you open a bank account, this has at least been true for me. When I open a bank account and I have whatever 6 different checking accounts for different projects in my life, never once have they asked me who I want to be my beneficiary or my payable on death. They don't ask that question for checking accounts, for savings accounts, or for money market accounts. I have never had that happen. So that means it's likely that if you have a checking account, a savings account, and a money market account, you probably don't have a beneficiary assigned unless you've gone out of your way to assign one. So I would highly encourage you to check into all your financial assets and see who your beneficiaries are. And the other thing you should know about beneficiaries and TODs and PODs is that if you used to be married to someone and they are your beneficiary and you would rather not have them get a bunch of your money, you can't stop that once you're dead. Because if they are your beneficiary, there is no stopping them getting your money. So that could be another potential motivation. This definitely happens. It happens all the time. So find out who your beneficiaries are, your transfer on death, your payable on death.
It really does happen a lot. I'm just speaking from the credit union perspective. What we see happen is, and it just breaks your heart, is that people can't even get into their basic bank account when, you know, when someone dies because they don't have a POD. So I think that's really critical. Another thing that our lawyer pointed out to us was if there's a car, make sure that you have joint ownership because otherwise it'll go into probate. So whatever, you know, a lot of people have vehicles in their own name, but not in their spouse's name. And you want to have it in both names or in the name of a child or something, wherever you want it to go, but so it doesn't have to end up in probate.
Yeah, joint right of survivorship is another way of saying that. And I think you've mentioned that, Charlotte, or somebody mentioned that, where like, if you're coming close to death and you don't have a shared account with your spouse or your power of attorney, which I'll define in a second, you might want to get them as a co-owner on some of these accounts, which is actually not, it's even like more power. It's more access than a beneficiary, right? Because then they sort of co-own the account. So if you trust someone, if you want someone as a co-owner on your accounts, that's another way to do it. And also you can sign a title of a car over to somebody, or you can have a joint ownership of a car. Absolutely. So your healthcare agent is your person responsible for making decisions for you while you're alive. And once you die, it's often called power of attorney, right? Or executor, or another word that implies someone that has sort of a financial permission to deal with your affairs. The last category on this slide is the will, or the estate, or your real property, or your belongings, or a trust if you're going to do a trust. In most cases, anything but a trust is going to need to be probated, especially if things are unassigned. It's just going to be trickier. It's going to be in court and in probate for longer. If things are clear, it's going to be faster. And if you really wanted to go the whole 9 yards, which is what Charlotte's talking about, you can pay an attorney, and $1,500 is quite cheap. I've actually heard people say it's been $4,000 to $6,000 for a trust. It's just a much more complicated legal structure. And it's like a vault. Once you put stuff in your trust, like, it's not questions. The government has no access to it. It doesn't go through probate. It's like what you say will happen. It's almost like its own legal entity. That's your $5 an hour advice on trust. Anybody have anything else to share here that they've experienced? You wanna, let me say one more thing. You want to define, in the same way you defined your first, second, and third choice healthcare agent, you want to define your first, second, and third choice executor for your will. That person's going to have to, deal with the probate, deal with the dissemination, deal with the death certificate, get all your affairs in order after you're dead. And the more you can put in order, the less of a hassle it's going to be on them, and the more they can enjoy the process, right? The before, during, and after your death process. Some people assign that executor role to a paid person, like a lawyer or an accountant. Some people have friends or family members and then say, hey, please pay yourself out of my estate. I want you to pay yourself for this work. It's hard to imagine taking on an executor role without actually getting compensated. Unless it was my mom or something, or a very close person to me, I would want to be compensated for that work personally. Any questions, thoughts, comments, any advice, any suggestions people have or having gone through this themselves? Where is everybody in the process of this? Is everybody?
I recently refinanced my house, and I asked the lawyer if he would help me draw a will to leave the property to my child. And he said I didn't need that most people don't know that in this state, the house goes directly to him.
Oh.
So obviously I'm not going to go back to him to ask him the same question, but is anybody in town that knows how to create a trust and all that?
Yeah, so I think it's probably true that your next of kin, is he your only child?
Yes.
Yeah, it's probably true that your next of kin would just inherit whatever is left, and that would be in probate. And that would be sort of like how the law follows the trail, right? But if, for example, you wanted somebody else to get something of yours or some things of yours, I've heard lawyers, can do a package of like $450, and they like to do everything. So they like to do the whole shebang, the will and the advanced care documents, and whatever else you need, or funeral arrangements. So they have like a package deal where you do all that stuff. And I suppose you could talk to them and say, listen, I have these 5 wishes, or you could let the lawyer do whatever they do and then sort of review the paperwork and either use that or not use that and use your 5 wishes. but it's really good to get a will from a professional. They also have will templates online. I actually did my own will. I don't advise that, but I had a friend that helped me create the template, and I don't share it because it's just one of those things. I don't want to be liable for anybody, thinking that was legal or financial advice, but I did my own will, and hopefully it's workable. Someday I might get a more legal version, but it's pretty clear, and it'll have to be probated. I mean, the trust thing, every lawyer that does legacy work will do trusts. Anyone in town, right? And you might find out from Charlotte who she worked with. There's gazillion lawyers that do trusts. You can try to do your own trust, but I swear the book on it is like this thick. It's very complex. So it seems worth it. Again, is it $5,000? Is it more than that? I'm just not sure. So if you wanted to, more and more people are doing trusts because they want to have that sort of vault sense of like, this stuff is protected.
Right, because I wouldn't want the medical bills eat up that. So is that going to protect that?
That is why I did it, because I don't have life insurance. And in the event that I would end up in a long-term care facility, then the government can take your house or whatever assets you have to pay for that. And so now that it's in a trust, that will not go through probate, and it will go to my beneficiaries. And I would think, since you have one child, that you'd want to do that. And what you can do is research a lawyer who specializes in end of care or end of life issues. That's what this lawyer whom I dealt with was especially dealt with those issues. So he was really good to advise me.
Okay, thank you.
And he does not do a trust for everybody, because the people who told me about him, they were going to go do a trust, and he advised them not to. Their situation was different. I don't know what the difference was, but for me, he said, yes, it was a good idea for them not. So, a lawyer can advise you about that.
Yeah, good to know.
But the medical bills could use the property or not?
Yes.
Not at all.
Yes, the government can take whatever assets you have to pay for your long-term care.
Well, but what about hospitalization, like medicine and operations and stuff?
I think that if you're under Medicare, that is taken care of. But I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't have Medicare yet. Yeah.
You're probably too young, but I'm close to 80, so I have definitely got it.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, when you turn 65, you're automatically enrolled in Medicare, except that you have to elect for a like Plan B that you pay for your meds and stuff. So if you go in the hospital, you're covered, but if you're a diabetic, then you need to pay for your Plan B.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. I mean, the trust is, I guess, the only thing that could, so even if you're elderly and you haven't yet gone into a long care facility, but you say you give the house and all your assets to your children, and then you go into a long-term care facility, they can still come after that money if it was within the last 15 years. Because they are trying to get people to not do this loophole thing. But I do think there's something about trusts that gets around that. Is that right, Charlotte? Like,
That's my understanding. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because if we have to wait 50 more years, I don't know that I'll make that.
15, right? Yeah, 15 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So good. Yeah. So more just, I would encourage you to do the research, find a lawyer, get your will set up. Anything more on financial stuff? Marianne.
Yeah, Victoria, I have somebody in Asheville that I have both somebody that I like and somebody I would avoid. So maybe we'll do that on the QT because since we're buddies. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Great. Anything else on financial stuff? Great. Yeah, it's important to have. I have my will all done, have for years, because you just never know. All right, so I would like to talk a little bit about death community, and then we're going to spend some time with our buddies. I just feel so excited about death community as a place to explore death, for us to feel welcome to talk about end of life, and also a place to grieve. And so, like, different groups have different levels of intimacy with this conversation, right? So here's some brainstorms, but I'd also like to hear from you. Here's faith communities, getting together, support groups, book groups, attending deaths, rituals. Here's a picture of our ancestor altar. We do a Day of the Dead celebration around Halloween or Samhain every year at our community. And there's Day of the Dead gatherings and rituals all throughout Asheville and probably all over the country. It sort of comes to us from Mexico and other cultures that have a really robust relationship with death. This altar is an ancestor altar, meaning all of the people in our lives that have passed on. And we get together for an evening where we make the favorite foods of our ancestors, whether they be beloved friends or family members, and the foods that they loved. And then we tell stories for hours and hours on end about our beloved dead. So it's a beautiful, beautiful ritual, and the kinds of things that I believe we want to cultivate more conversation, right? So what are some ideas that you all have? Far-fetched, like, wow, this would be great if it happened, but also, what do you think of in your life as resources for death community, and what you might feel inspired by? I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other better. Did we just lose Jane?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe she'll come back.
No, she wrote in the chat that she had to leave.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Okay, so what do you think about death community? What would you like to see?
First, I have a question. I was when I saw this, coming up, and Holly talking about it, I was really excited and sort of put it out there, thinking that other people who know me might sign up, and it was crickets. And I'm wondering, from your experience, how it's been in general, because I was sort of surprised at the reaction.
I mean, I tend to be on the side of hearing people's excitement about it, because I'm one of those people they feel like they can go to and talk about death. And there's certainly plenty of people who aren't coming to me to talk to me about death, but there tends to be, there tends to be interest in community, and then it's contagious, it spreads, like, whoever was here because of Johanna, I don't know who that was.
That was me.
That was you, Charlotte. Yeah. So, I guess, I don't know. What do y'all think? Like, maybe it's a topic people just like to avoid. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a topic people don't know how to address. That it's just not a topic we talk about a lot. And very often we experience it in a shocking way. And, there's an unexpected deaths, there are expected deaths. And I just don't think it's a conversation that's had on a regular basis with a thoughtful, caring, loving, how do we address this? But I also think that in my generation, there are a lot of single people that didn't have, married people that didn't have children. And so they're looking at this, or they may be, or maybe they haven't even addressed it yet. I mean, I hadn't. And now all of a sudden I'm going, well, this is really interesting, actually. This could be fun. I was very touched by your photographs of, the the 3-day events that you had. And it made me think about the process again that I went through with my mother, where it was very long term, 6 years of caregiving with her. And then after she passed, it was like, well, how quickly can we get everything done to finish this up? And I feel after looking at the photographs of the 3 days that, boy, even that we were exhausted, but we missed out on that very beautiful process that, you just revealed. And that really, the lights go on when I looked at that and just went, that's really interesting. And, we hear about it, or I've heard about it, well, other countries and other cultures doing it, but I love it that you guys have done that. And it just makes me think about, well, how could I create that? How could we create that?
Right.
So it's a different option, and it's not one that I think a lot of us realize is available to us. So
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind, Vidila, is like maybe the paperwork and planning part is a little too intense for folks, but what would it look like to have a Day of the Dead party or a book club, right? Like, hey, let's read Being Mortal together, or Grief Walker, or let's watch a film, or let's have a death and dessert party, and find out from your friends what their interests and fears are about it. I think it's an interesting question.
yeah.
What else on death community? How can we continue to support each other? I mean, we've talked about having healthcare agents and teams. And so in order to do that, we need to know our teams pretty well and be able to get together with our teams regularly and talk about what we want and what they want, right? And hopefully, ideally, going through a really positive death experience together to cement those bonds with each other. What does it look like to let our friends know that we're interested in attending their deaths, or being a support or of service to them at whatever level they're willing, right? Hey, I've just taken this class and I don't imagine that you're dying, but just keep me in mind. I'm trying to up my literacy here. I'm trying to really, get some experience with death and dying.
Well, and also supporting others' planning of it as we go through the planning process as a beginning.
Yeah, I mean, one topic for a death and dessert party might be where you invite friends and, hey, there's going to be triple layer chocolate cake, and I'm going to share with you the class I just took, and you can look at my 5 wishes document.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at my death certificate. You can look at my addendum. You can look at my disposition of body. I'm going to lay all these, just don't get chocolate cake on it, but I'm going to lay out all my documents over here and pick them up, hold them, look at them. That can demystify things a little bit. You could even bury a plastic skull in the cake, and then whoever gets the skull is forced to fill out their paperwork next. It's like throwing a bridal arrangement, right? You get to fill out your paperwork next. I think education is key. The Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, which is, based out of Reuters Center at UNC Asheville, has end-of-life classes that are probably some overlap with this and also probably some different. I think they even had one understanding the financial end-of-life will stuff. So ongoing education, continuing to invite. I mean, if this is the first time your friends are seeing the invitation, it might be oh my God. But maybe if they see it 3 more times, then they'll be okay, clearly Vidila's asking me to do this. Let me make an effort, My friend Mary Lane, who I think I told you about her last time, she lives on Maui, and she and 8 of their friends have vowed to be with each other for death, and they midwife to their friend Joy through her death in a really positive way, and attended a bunch of advanced sort of end of life doula trainings together and like really had this big, strong commitment with each other. They built really big community around death. And I think you're right, Sherry, like for those of us who are single, you know, it's not a foregone conclusion that we have, you know, that there's a spouse that's going to care for us. And I feel grateful for that actually, because it gives me an opportunity to expand the narrative and to create new ideas, pioneer new ways of being.
Yes. Mhm.
Support groups. I mean, if someone in the community does die, you know, it's someone you all have talked about someone dying recently, like, hey, you know, is there any way I can help support us having a, you know, a support process to process our feelings about this death? And, you know, can we continue supporting the spouse or the widow or the children or whatever? Can we check in about it? So like using a death as an opportunity to build more community.
Mhm.
Other ideas?
I'm curious. I seem to have seen either it was a part of your site on Facebook or some other site where it had a lot of these quotes and things about death that at one point I found it and I was trying to find it again and I couldn't. And it just occurred to me having like a group that's just, well, I'm trying to, sometimes I tell myself I'm going to quit Facebook because I hate it, but here I am giving another idea to expand it. Making a group that is like, you know, graduates of this program or whatever, so that, you know, occasionally there can be communication, or if there's a movie or a get together or something. I used to have lots of migraines, and I read this certain book by this woman who was a specialist. And anyway, she has this crazy group of followers that has this page, this Facebook site that is really growing and becoming larger. So that may be a way, you know, to continue at least growing what you're doing, or to link it to something else.
There's a page, Facebook called Asheville Alternative Death Care Discussion. I don't think I have this linked on my resource page, but I can link it. So it's people in the alternative death world, and people post there pretty regularly. So that's one option. And I like what you're saying, like folks can come and gather and comment. Yeah. And the Death Cafe is sort of an international movement where people come together and without any specific guidance or facilitation, they break out into small groups and talk about death. I think someone here was talking about how they didn't have a positive experience, but you know, it's a misfit bunch of people. And I've also had both positive and not so positive experience at Death Cafe. And that's sort of how the grassroots movements go. Yeah. Good stuff. I mean, there's a good amount of practitioners in Western North Carolina, like this, my friend Catherine Savage is doing this flax project where she's encouraging people to grow their own flax and then weave their own shrouds. And so it's like this whole process of being engaged with the seed and the plants, and the process of making the fiber and then weaving the shroud, and then having this really sacred sort of homegrown, land-grown, place-based shroud system. And it's just such a beautiful process. There's there are doula training programs. So, you know, there's doulas in our region who specialize in death care support. Good. Yeah. I think salons, you know, another fun thing to do that's maybe like a little more serious or intellectual than a death and dessert party is this idea of like a salon, like pick a topic, like, okay, all right, friends, we're all of an age where our parents are dying now. Let's have a salon topic about that. You know, what's our role in our parents' lives as they die? How do we feel about them in living with us or not living with us, or in a long-term facility or on their own, or like, what are the issues that are coming up for you? Like that's a beautiful way to support a process like that. All right. I think I'm going to send you you all out into your buddy groups, which unfortunately not everyone is here. So I'm going to tell me who goes with who.
Me and Sherry.
Good.
Sherry and Vidilla. Okay.
Charlotte and I,
Charlotte and who?
Michelle.
Michelle. Okay.
Marianne and Victoria.
Charlotte and Michelle. Okay. Mary Ann and Victoria. And that leaves you, Mary and Ed, you're together. So who's with Jane?
Jane's not here.
Right. But,
Jane was with us.
Yeah,
okay, great.
there was 3 of us.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to send you out to your rooms and I want you to look over your checklists and I want you to add anything in there about deaf community that you think you want to do. Even if it's like, hey, sometime this year, I want to host a conversation or, you know, I want to try for a book club or I want to, you know, death and dessert party. It can be far out, but you know, why don't you sit with all of your checklist and figure out what else needs to be done and what kind of support you each need. How much time do y'all want for that?
10 minutes.
10 is fine?
I think so.
Sure.
All right. Acclamation. Me, Mama. How are you all doing?
We're tired.
We're tired. We're kind of done, near done. Not near death, just near done.
I hear ya. It's a lot,
It's a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
for sure. And it's an efficient way to do it, you know?
I really thought there was a list of books on your site there. Wasn't there a list of books to read I saw somewhere?
Mhm. Yeah, it's under general resources. There's a couple books, there's some videos, there's some other links. And I found what I was looking for. It's called aquamation. It is a alkaline water-based way, eco-friendly alternative to cremation called aquamation. I put the link in the chat and I also put the link on the website page. Might be your cup of tea, Vidila. All right, we're coming home to the home stretch. What other things? C.S. Lewis.
Sorry, what do you say you put something in the chat?
Yeah.
The chat disappears because we were in a breakout room.
Okay.
Can you drop it in again?
Yep.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So C.S. Lewis says there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. What are the last things y'all want to say or share or offer or ask? How are you doing on your checklists?
I have a lot to get done.
And is your buddy, are you all buddied up? You're going to support each other through that process? Good.
Yeah, and I need your email. We need to exchange emails, I guess.
Are you talking to your buddy?
Yeah,
Uh-huh. So
But-
one opportunity, so one thing I can do is share all y'all's email addresses with each other. If you don't want that, chat me or email me and let me know and I'll leave yours out. But otherwise, I'll go ahead and send everybody's email address, and that way you have them and you can follow up or send a celebration if you've accomplished something, or offer of support or whatever.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. What else? Any inspirations, any takeaways, any last things you want to think about?
Yeah, I see that I got a lot to do, but it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And I really love this. I was to somebody else, I was saying, I'm reading this audiobook, listening to this audiobook, Civilized to Death, that's this guy talking about how we're just so disconnected from everything. And it's really lovely tapping back into this and finding a rootedness and a connection to a simpler way of doing things. And I really, really appreciate you, Lee, for coordinating this and for building this community. I think it's lovely, and I hope to help you continue it.
Yay, that sounds fun. Well, I will come to your death and dessert party if you have one.
Well, it'll be a death and meat party.
Death and meat party. Yeah, I'll come to that too.
Let's have a bunch of them.
Yeah. Yep. Death and barbecue, death and vegan dishes, death and whatever. Well,
now that everyone's proficient on Zoom, it doesn't matter if you're really nearby or not.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have the last two links I'm going to share with you are my Patreon account, if you decide you want to support me continuing to do this work, and also a link to the evaluation form. And in it, I just asked a very few questions and ask you to give a testimonial. So I will also email that to you. And I didn't record the first one. I'm trying to get out of the habit of recording these because they take a lot of extra work and just a bit of a hassle. But I did record today because Tina and Robert weren't able to be here, and it's an opportunity for them to sort of finish the class. But yeah, any last things as we wrap up?
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Your efforts, and for me, this is so new, but definitely something that I need to explore. I would love to be part of a book club if you ever have that, or watch a movie related to this. I would love that.
Yeah. Feel free to initiate that. I would love to come to something like that too. Great. Well, it's so lovely to be with you all and see your wonderful faces. This was definitely the overachieving class. Y'all were ahead of me every single time, but now you got to catch up with yourselves probably and do all your to-dos, and definitely rely on your buddies. That's what they're there for. And just because you're married doesn't mean you get to slack on being a buddy. All right. I think that's a wrap, y'all.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, very much.
We appreciate it.
Are you doing the class again?
I am. I think I might be doing it through SOIL, the School of Integrated Living. I'm in process of talking to them. So what I'll do is I'll probably send out an email update about the dates.
Okay.
All righty.
Yeah. I'll
Thanks,
hang out a little more if anybody has any last questions.
Yeah, I'm
Bye,
just
everybody. Good to see you.
copying this stuff out of the chat. If you could just hang on for a second.
Sure.
Lee, I did have a couple questions for you. Are you familiar at all with special needs groups in the Asheville area? I've got a brother I'm trying to find housing for. He's 70 and not easy.
Is it a mental health issue?
He was born with brain damage.
Uh-huh.
Developmentally, I think intellectual development.
What is that group that does the mental health stuff for families? I'm sure you know about it.
I know about VIA, but they don't help with housing.
Okay. Looking through my email, give me a second. NAMI, right? NAMI, NAMI.
NANI. Is that right?
NAM is in Mary, I. There's a local chapter. It's called the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I don't know if your brother falls into that category, but they're like one of the nation's largest grassroots movements around mental health and supporting families of people with mental health issues.
Right.
I don't know if they have housing, but I find them remarkably responsive, remarkably available. Like I find them to be an amazing resource. So I think if they don't offer what you're looking for, they might know who does.
Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful.
Housing in Asheville, holy cow.
Group home. That's what I'm looking for, is a group home.
Yeah.
And we had a wonderful situation in Atlanta, but it had to fold, unfortunately. But the model's a great model. And anyway, I wish I had the money to create it myself, but I'm not in that situation.
And he's
so.
not, your brother's not dying. He's healthy. He just can't live on his own. Right. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, my dear.
I would try NAMI. Yeah.
I will. Thank you very much. And I'll be in touch. I've got some other things I want to talk to you about down the road.
Okay, great. Good to be
All
with you,
right.
Gary.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Charlotte, did you have something, or you're just waiting on the? You're on mute, love. You're on mute. Usually your space bar would take it off mute.
I was typing.
Oh, I just muted you again. Sorry. I was trying to take you off mute and I just muted you, and because you and I did it at the exact same moment. Sorry.
Okay, unmute.
There you go.
I was typing the evaluation because I don't know how to download that.
It's not a download. You just fill it out on your
Okay,
web
yeah.
browser and then you submit it.
Yeah, okay, I'm almost done. Thank you so
Great.
much. It was
Yeah.
really helpful.
Good to be with you.